Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, you're listening to the Prince Podcast here on podcastjuice.net. My name is Michael Dean. As always, got a special guest in the house tonight. Y'all already know I will butcher a name. And this brother here has the name that you don't see often, so I'm going to try my best to pronounce it eloquently, and let's go. So joining me today, you've seen his name floating around. He's got a big book coming out, which we're going to talk about. It's Afshin Shahidi. Sir, how are you?
Shahidi.
Shahidi. There you see it.
You got the first name right.
How are you doing, man?
I'm great, Michael. How are you? Thanks for having me on. I'm glad we're finally able to connect.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to have you on. Totally, I'm honored. We watch from afar, us as fans, so being able to like chop it up and hear you guys speak is a blessing to us. And I want to respect your time because I know I would imagine you have a lot of things going on. You have this book coming out, and I want to talk about that. So the official title of the book is Prince, A Private View, and it's coming out October 24th of this year. I've already seen that. I see pictures are starting to kind of pop up online. People are like getting real hyped about this, man. How does this feel? And then this is not your first Prince book either, right?
No, I did. I did a book with Prince called, I think it was Prince in Hawaii.
Yes.
Portrait or intimate portrait of an artist. That was the first one, and I didn't realize we were doing a book. We had just gone on vacation. He said, "Hey, bring your family along."
Wow.
So I had 2 kids at the time. My wife, my 2 kids. We went to Hawaii and hung out. Obviously, I had my cameras with me, and we snapped a few pictures here and there. And then we got back, and Prince says, "What do you think about making a book?" So just like that, we made a book.
Yes, and that book is very hard to find at this point. Is there any sort of plans of re-releasing this book?
I would like to. That's what I've heard. I've seen some really ridiculous prices for it on Amazon and elsewhere. And so I want to try to find a way to re-release it so the fans or whoever's interested can buy it at a decent price.
Yes. All right.
I'm in talks with the people over at Paisley Park to see if they're interested in partnering up with it and to make it happen.
All right. Well, we're ready and waiting. So we got our debit cards and everything. We're ready for that.
Well, I just want whoever's interested in it to really get it. And in terms, obviously I need to make a living, but in terms of just giving something that the fans can continue Prince's legacy and remember him by is my first goal.
Right on, man. So I want to go into this new book, but it's something about the way that you take pictures of Prince and other people, but Prince particularly, and I wanted to say this before we go forward. When I remember the pictures from the Hawaii book, that was one of the rare times you didn't necessarily see him as this like superstar icon. It was like the pictures kind of more like normal type of stuff you could see Prince doing. Like, I remember it's the one where he was on the moped.
Right.
And I was like, Prince is on a moped. Like, where does this happen at? And it was just kind of like a very humanizing sort of take on Prince. And that was very special at that time. And even there's a shot now that's making the rounds, which I'm sure you're aware of. And it's Prince walking down the street with the guitar. Mm-hmm. Again, it's just like, it's a shocking type of picture because it seems so subtle. Like, it's just like, man, he's like a normal person. He's just like more real or something. I mean, is that like... I don't know if it's hard for you to answer this, but is that like more your style, or how would you define your style of photography?
That's more my style, but I came into this. I was a cinematographer, so I started working with Prince on music videos in '93. So 10 years before I actually started photographing him, with still photography, I was shooting music videos and working on music videos. So he kind of plucked me from that and said, "Hey, what do you think about being a photographer?" So I was dabbling before, so it was kind of a natural transition. A lot of the same rules applied, but I had, my style was more naturalistic, and for me, it was always interesting to juxtapose this person that you see as an icon, and like you pointed out, seeing him doing normal things. I thought that's what's interesting, or what's more interesting than, okay, here is a star posing as a star with, lights and makeup and stuff. So whenever I could, I would try to get Prince to well, not even try to do anything, but I would just have my cameras. And so when he was doing something, like the picture that you said with him on the moped, he literally, we were at his house in Hawaii. He got on a moped, and then I scrambled to get my cameras. I'm like, oh my God, what a moment. I gotta, and I got that one picture before he sped off. So a lot of that stuff is unplanned. Him walking with the guitar. We went out, and I said, that one was a little more planned. I said, hey, Prince, do you mind just walking, and I can shoot a few pictures of you walking? He was like, sure. He was game for it. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, no problem. And is it just as to go into the sort of collaboration working with Prince? Is he very open to ideas in terms of you suggesting things when you guys are doing stuff?
No, absolutely. Actually, that's what he's looking for. There was very few times that I can recall where he actually said, "This is what I want to shoot." Okay. So I he would call, and he knew he wanted to shoot, or he needed images for something. And early on, when I started photographing him, a lot of the images were for his music club. That's where they were appearing. So we were doing a lot, but it was never, hey, come shoot me like this. It was more like, hey, come on over. Okay, now that you're here, figure out a way, to make something interesting. So he was always open to collaboration. And then, we'd start vibing, and I'd suggest something, and he'd come up with an idea that would, perhaps make it better. And we'd kind of go back and forth and try a lot of things. It was actually a lot of fun shooting with him.
Wow. Now, when did you first meet Prince?
I grew up in Minneapolis, so just as a Minneapolis kid and as a music fan, I was listening to Prince in high school. That's when I started. Never really thinking that I would either meet him or work with him, but I was a huge fan, obviously, and Purple Rain was really influential for me. But years later, I got back from college. I'd studied physics for a few years, and then finally got a degree in communication and was trying to be a filmmaker. And I was back in Minneapolis trying to figure out what to do when I got a phone call or a text. Actually, not even a text, a page. Let's go all the way back. And it was to work on a music video, and they wouldn't tell me who it was for, but they had asked me to load film, and I didn't know how to load film, but I figured I had a few days to learn, so I said, yeah, sure, I can do it. Ended up being for Prince, and they needed me that day, and so I showed up not really knowing how to do the thing that they hired me to do, but I'm like, I gotta go. It's Prince's house. So I met him there at Paisley Park. I walked in, and the shoot was already going on. I think they may have fired the last couple people. So I walked in and see Prince just jamming on the guitar, and I was blown away.
Wow. Do you remember what video or song this was for?
I don't remember what that one was for, which is kind of crazy to say because, when you're shooting a music video, you hear the song over and over and over again. The one song that stands in my mind that I remember just hearing so many times when we were shooting the video for was Endorphin Machine. Oh, okay. But from that point on, I worked on quite a few videos, but I don't recall what that first one was. I was just so kind of in awe and nervous and, trying to figure out how to do this thing that I had told them I knew how to do. So there was a lot of things going on. I don't remember the song, unfortunately. Wow.
That's a common thread I hear from a lot of people who've worked with him is like, you get asked to do something that may not necessarily be your thing, but it's sort of that moment where you say, hey, I'm diving in and let's go, we'll figure it out. So that's amazing.
Absolutely. And that's how the photography came about because, after we got to know each other and he became comfortable with me, because I would be at Paisley quite a bit working on these videos. That's when he said, hey, you do still photography? And it was like, you do now.
Wow. So getting into the photography, was that a thing where you had to, not to get overly technical, but did you have to let me figure out what cameras to get? I mean, how did you, feel comfortable with that?
Cinematography and photography are very similar. It's just one involves motion and the other one is a moment in time. So I was already dabbling. I had a camera. My mother was a hobbyist, so I grew up with her having a darkroom. So I was very familiar, with the whole process, and I did have a camera. So technically, it was I was adept. It was just more creatively figuring out, okay, when what we've been working with is a large crew and lighting and, like him jamming on a guitar or whatever. Okay, how do I take that and make a single image that stands out and is interesting? Well, so that was really the challenge.
All right. I wanted to ask you two questions, but you mentioned your mother, and I'm just curious, what did your family think when you started working with Prince? Like, what did, was that I would imagine it's a big deal, but I'm just curious if your mom was a photographer and now here you are sort of going into this for this musical hometown hero, right?
Right. They were excited for me. I mean, they knew what a Prince fan I was, since high school. So they were pretty excited. But for a lot of my family, the film business was still kind of like this phase I was going through. My aunts would occasionally call and say, it's not too late to get into computers. So I wasn't really sure what that meant. But my mother and my stepfather were really excited and encouraging.
All right. What was the first photo that sort of either got published or one that you remember, like you were like, wow, I did that. This is the one that started me up here.
The first things that I did with him when he asked me to if I was a photographer, and I kind of mumbled through kinda, was he had me come out and shoot his band for a tour book. And so I was shooting, John Blackwell, Renato, and I'm trying to think who else was there. I don't know if Morris was there, but I was shooting the band, and he would pop in and look and kind of, make suggestions and go away. And then when I went back a few days later to show him the film, he really liked it, and then he asked me to photograph him.
Wow.
So the first time I photographed him, really, it was just in and around Paisley. And I think some of those shots made it into some of the tour books, but I have the first couple of photos that I took in my book of Prince. But the one that I really recall was there's a picture of him. It's a live shot with him playing the guitar. And if you bought the One Night Alone box set, There's a booklet, and it's the cover of the booklet.
Okay.
And that shot I remember only because I had taken it, and then, I had given some of the film to Prince, and they were making whatever they were making. But then the next time I saw it, I was at one of the venues, I think in Europe, during One Night Alone, just kind of walking outside in the common area before the show started, and I saw that picture as a poster for sale.
Wow.
And it was like, wow, okay.
Nice, man.
Yeah, there was a lot of surprises like that because I didn't know how the images were going to be used, so they would just pop up here and there, and I would see them for the first time.
Amazing.
I'd be like, wow, okay, that's on a T-shirt. Wow, that's a poster. Oh my God, this is on Rolling Stone.
Amazing. Man, so you mentioned the One Night Alone. So assuming is that the first tour you went out with Prince? Or
that was the first tour, and that was kind of as a result of that first photo shoot with him when I photographed him. Because after we did that, and I went back and showed him the film, he asked me, he's like, "How would you like to go on the road with us?" And I was blown away because, it was huge.
Right. I can imagine, man. So this is interesting because I'm going to go back a little bit. You were in high school when Purple Rain came out. So you were probably like either a freshman or a senior in 84. You're a freshman or a sophomore maybe in 84.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I was a big deal. I remember it was a big deal in my area. You being sort of like a fan first, was there ever a moment when you said they called you and say, we got a job, we don't want to tell you who it is, but assuming when you find out you have to go to Paisley Park, it's pretty obvious, like, oh, okay, I'm going to meet Prince. Was there ever a moment where you were just kind of like, man, I got to kind of geek out here and just take in where I'm at, like, this is crazy?
Absolutely. I had driven by Paisley Park, a number of times, so I knew the facility. I'd never stepped in, so just going onto the grounds, I was in awe. Like, wow, I get to walk in there. But literally, things were already going on. So it wasn't like the beginning of the day when I got there. Things are in full motion, LA crews out there shooting. And when I stepped in, Prince is performing. And so, yeah, I was I was in awe and just, had to take it in.
Right. So I just kind of wanted to touch on some of the times that you're with Prince. So we did One Night Alone. I imagine you were there for like musicology.
Mm-hmm.
And does this also include? So I like the. I'm thinking of 3121. The cover, is that your photography there? That's on the cover?
The cover of that album is mine. Yep.
So that kind of puts me in some things. I'm going to touch on 3121 for a second. Sure. I remember the CD, and it said like 3121, like the album, right? And then it sort of insinuates that there were other things of 3121, and my understanding is there was like a some sort of movie or a video thing shot. Do you remember any thoughts of any of that stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. It was and is a movie. It's a feature film. I shot a lot of it. I directed pieces of it. It was a film that was kind of loosely put together with no script per se, just a lot of ideas. Probably the most memorable thing was I got a call, one evening I was stepping into a movie with my wife, and I answered it, and it was Prince, and he said, "Can you come to Panama tomorrow?"
Wow.
So I flew down to Panama thinking we're going to take some pictures, and when I got down there, he's like, "Oh, we're going to continue shooting part of the movie down here." Wow. So then I had to turn around and fly back to the States to get equipment and some crew, and then go back to Panama, and we shot there I think we were there for a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks.
Oh, amazing.
And shot parts of the film down there. So yeah, I mean, it was 3121 became much larger than the album. I mean, as you guys probably know, it started out as the address of one of the homes that Prince would rent, when he would come out to LA in the winter, and just started having these parties that were really amazing. And so I think that inspired him to make the album, to name it 3121, and then that led into the movie. I think he wanted to do a magazine called 3121, so morphed into a lot of things.
Do you remember if that movie was actually ever finished?
I believe there's a cut of it. I believe there's a full edit of it. Whether it's in a finished state, I'm not sure. Gotcha. But I know that there is a full cut of it.
And also this time you guys were working with Tamar. And I think you did some shots of her as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Tamar was a big part of his life during that period. So he went out in support of her and her album, right. And I shot the cover for that stuff. But yeah, amazing voice. Obviously, you guys have heard her. Quite talented, and Prince had a knack for picking out talent.
For sure. What other? Can you remember any other? I'm always curious about these movies and video things that he has, and just sort of in the vault that you only hear about. Were there any other projects like that you worked on that you can speak of?
There's quite a few things that we shot that at the time, both I've never heard the song again or seen the video, and a lot of it, when I started working with Prince early on, it was during the when he had Slave written on his face, and a funkier time. So a lot of the videos as we're shooting, I'm like, wow, this is really risque. I don't think MTV in America would ever play this. Maybe he can have it air in France or something. So a lot of that stuff ended up in the vault, but we didn't really get the names for the songs, and a lot of it we never heard again. So hopefully one day, if they decide to release that material, there's a whole wealth of music videos and songs that are in there.
Let me throw some names at you then, because now you kind of dated with the Slave thing. Did you work on, there was the 18 and over? Were you around?
What year was that? Do you remember?
It would have been like 94 maybe?
Yeah. Yeah,
it was I've seen this video online. Obviously, I know the song, but it's a video, and I think there's like two twin girls in it. It's not the twin.
Yes. I did work on that, and a bunch of other ones from the album. I did. I don't know if this was from the album, but I Hate You. We did that.
I Hate You. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, but 18 and over, I remember. I had early on. Working on these videos, I was a focus puller. So for people that don't know, as the camera moves around and is, shooting different people, you have to literally change the focus on the lens. So whatever you want is in focus.
Gotcha.
So my job was to do that. And on one of the shots, when you said the twins, it reminded me, there was I think a big wide kind of performance shot, and the camera that I was the focus puller on was on a crane. So it was swinging around, going all over the place. Mm-hmm. And it was on a really long lens, which means, it was a close-up. And so I had to figure out how far the camera is from the person. So not everything was always sharp. Not everything was always in focus because the camera's moving, Prince was moving.
Wow.
So the next day we're back there, and he had gotten dailies, and there was some stuff that was soft. So he called me out on it. He's like, "Yo, you gonna make sure I'm in focus today?" So that's what brought that memory back when you said the twins. But yeah, I worked on that video.
Okay. Yeah.
I worked on Dolphin.
Yes. Oh, okay. Wow.
Endorphin Machine. Mm-hmm. A bunch of stuff from the Gold Experience.
Man, so you was there when I love that era, man. There was a lot of dope stuff going on with Prince, and I say it's a shame because a lot of it was never officially released, and it was such great music. Wow. Okay. And you just mentioned something, how Prince, what he said to you, like, how was it working with him? Would he, did you have to always be on point, or would he call you out in a certain way if things weren't necessarily right? Were you nervous?
Yeah, I mean, at that time, things changed as he got older and matured, and, during the One Night Alone and stuff, things changed. But during that era, that was the era when that first day that I walked in where they said, don't look Prince in the eyes and don't look him in the face. And I don't know if that was necessarily something that Prince had requested, but the people that were working around him would always say that. So he was mysterious. And so when he said something to you, it was a big deal because he wasn't talking to the crew. Now, he had seen my face around there enough that he had gotten used to me and knew my name. Actually, he knew my name from the first day because when I walked in there, he's like, "Who's this kid?" and asked me, he's like, "Who are you?"
Wow.
But it was nerve-wracking at that point. Once I got to know him and once I started photographing him, it was a whole different thing, and he was a whole different person. But at that point, yeah, everybody had to be on point, and there was no trying to explain anything. It was either a yes or no. He didn't want a long explanation. He just wanted to know the answer and to move on.
Wow. Okay. And it's interesting because your relationship must involve with him and change because, jumping ahead, I love when I see the story that he had your daughter's picture on his desk. So getting to that point, you guys must have really gotten to be real cool with each other. Where in terms of, he knows your family and things of that nature. When was that sort of turning point when, you kind of stopped being just a photographer and like, yo, Afshin, man, what's going on? How's the family and that type of thing?
Early on, I think it happened during and after One Night Alone.
Okay.
Prior to that, like I said, I was a technician that would come in, and then I ended up being a cinematographer, so working a little more closely with them. But still, I was in and out. I wasn't really there after hours. So I think during One Night Alone, we spent a lot of time, going over the images after the band went back to sleep. Prince obviously had an enormous amount of energy. So after playing a show and then an after show, we'd spend another hour or two looking at images and talking. So I think we bonded during that time. But he had met my wife the very first photo shoot that I did. My wife came as my assistant. And I don't think he realized at that point that she was my wife. It was a few shoots later where, he heard me calling her baby or something. And he's like, "Oh, it's like that, huh?" Until he realized we were married. But so, yeah, he got to know me. He got to know her. Then he invited us to Hawaii, and I brought the whole family. He got to know my daughter, Yara. And my daughter's an actress, and once we moved to LA, she ended up doing a movie, and he was a big fan of hers and really supportive. So he was very sweet and very much into family and into children.
Yeah, I heard that he bought out the theater for the first movie. Imagine That, right?
Yeah, she did a movie with Eddie Murphy called Imagine That. many years ago. And when it came out, he loved movies, so this was a common thing. But he rented out the Chanhassen movie theater, and a couple nights in a row, and brought whoever was at Paisley over to see the movie.
Nice,
man.
I gotta ask you this, as a father. So first of all, I salute you, man. Your family is doing wonderful. I saw a picture today. I was showing my girlfriend. I said, "This is a dope ass picture." It's you and your family with Obama, Michelle. And I was like, "Wow, that's a good look, right?" I was like, "This is," you know what I mean. So I'm trying to gas you up, but on a real way, like you're really doing your thing. Your family's doing excellent. Of course, your daughter, she got the spinoff show from Blackish about to come off. What? How do you sort of juggle going around the world with Prince and back then doing that thing and then raising a family? Now you mentioned obviously you took your family to Hawaii with you. Did they travel with you a lot during these times?
Well, first I got to say it takes a special partner and spouse for this to work, and for us to for me to be able to do this, for us to be able to maintain our relationship. So. If my wife wasn't the special person that she is, I don't know if it would have worked.
Yes.
But yeah, they wouldn't travel with me, but they would come visit me. So during One Night Alone in London, where it kind of kicked off the European leg, my wife flew out with my daughter, and she was pregnant at the time. So technically, my middle son was with us too, but he was in the womb. But she came out, and they came to the shows. And then what was really cool and was, I'm thankful for is I would work a really long day and a really long night because he'd do the show and then the after show, and I would come back to the hotel just really wiped out. And my wife had come to the show, but then, they had gone back. But she would have food there for me, and then in the morning she would take my film to the lab and drop it off, and pick it up. So it's always been a family affair. I mean, it's a partnership and our bond that really allows us to do this and make it work.
How does one? So your wife is an actress as well, right?
Correct.
And of course, I think pretty much all of your kids have been in something, acting wise, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they've all done it. Obviously, Yara is on a show. Saeed's been on a couple of different shows.
Okay.
He's focusing on high school and basketball right now. He just made his JV team. So
congratulations.
And then our youngest, who's 9, has watched the 2 older ones do it, and he's like, okay, if they're doing it, I can do it better.
Wow. I mean, so you have a family of creatives, man. Like, what is that household like? Everyone sort of has a creative spark going on.
It's both fun and exciting, and sometimes it's tiring because we're all, there's been times literally where on one day we've been on 5 different sets. My wife is working on something, my daughter and son are on something, and I'm out of town on something else. So it gets crazy. We have a nice support network here that helps us and allows us to do it, but it gets pretty nutty. Going back to the creative part, really though, I gotta say, working with Prince kind of changed my view because to him, and I've said this before, he just showed me that anything was possible. Creatively, and he really pushed the boundaries. He never wanted to do anything twice. If I showed him a picture and I said, "Oh, let's do something like this," he'd be like, "Why? They've already done it." Like, okay, so let's come up with something better. So he kind of instilled that in me, and my wife and I try to instill that in our children. But really, it's been the partnership and the strong wife that I have, Carrie, who's made this all possible.
Now you said you are from Minneapolis, but you're back. You are Iranian, am I?
I'm Iranian.
Iranian.
My mother and I moved to the United States when I was 7. We lived just outside of D.C. for a short time, and then my mother went to Minneapolis. I had an uncle who had gone to college in Minneapolis and set up a business, and my mom went to visit him. And I know it was summertime because had she gone to Minneapolis in the winter to visit, there's no way we would have ended up moving there. But so she went and visited him, like, wow, this is a beautiful place. And then, I followed, and then I started grade school in Minneapolis.
What was that like, just coming from a different country and culture, coming here to America, Minneapolis? What was that like for you?
It was difficult. First of all, my parents had gotten divorced when I was really young, so my father didn't come. He had no interest in leaving Iran. And my mother and I, left for just a better life and opportunity, which is kind of why which is why so many other people have come to this country. But I remember early on it was difficult. I didn't speak the language, and the second day I was in the United States, they dropped me off in Fairfax, Virginia. They dropped me off at school.
Oh, wow.
Put me in third grade.
Wow.
And the only thing I knew, and I had a cousin who was 1 year younger than me, who was in second grade at the school. So the only thing I knew was how to get from the classroom that they had put me in to the front door to meet him to be able to get home. And that's all I was focused on. So that first day, I remember pretty vividly, they had a fire alarm. And I had no idea what that was because we didn't have fire alarms in Iran. Everyone got up and left. And I didn't want to leave this room because I didn't want to go somewhere else where I wouldn't know how to get to the front to meet my cousin to get home. So I sat there throughout the fire drill, and nobody noticed, and they went and they came back, and the teacher probably kind of freaked out to see me still sitting there. But it was difficult. Then I started learning the language. This was also during the time that the hostage crisis was going on, so people's feelings about Iran were not that good. So it was a little bit of that to deal with. Listening to kids. This was now I was in Minneapolis, but listening to kids repeat what their parents said about Iran and Iranians. So it was a little difficult, but, I found my footing and made it through.
I'm sorry, you said this was in Virginia?
Initially Virginia, Fairfax, Virginia, just outside of D.C. is where we first went, and I had an aunt there that we stayed with.
How old were you when you came to Minneapolis? Was that...
I must have been 9. Again, like it's hard for me to remember some of those things, but I think I was 8 or 9 because I was 7 or 8 when we first came, and then shortly thereafter I ended up in Minneapolis.
So this is like probably 79, 80, 1980 or so,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I remember that hostage thing, and it's interesting to think about that, and then to think about sort of where we're at today, with stuff, man. And I would imagine you have an interesting sort of take on that. But I wanted to, how do you, and so I'm asking this because you have an interesting mixture. Obviously you have African-American wife, your kids are of mixed heritage. How did you sort of instill in them, just from the experiences that you have as a kid, and then the things that are going on today? Because I see your daughter; she's very much seen as an activist as well, very outspoken, eloquent, and has her own thoughts about it. But I always say that's got to come from the parents, at least, to be able to have this, the spirit to be like that. Were you and your wife sort of very politically active around your kids? I mean, we have a lot of family discussions, and so we've talked about a lot of things. We're not, as active per se as Yara is, or not as vocal. So there's always been family discussions, but we come from a kind of a line of activists on both sides. My father-in-law was an activist in the 60s and 70s, civil rights. I have people in my family that have been vocal about different things. So she's seen that, but really Yara has just this curiosity about the world and about people that's driven her to read a lot, to research a lot. Okay. Oh, I wanted to ask you this question, and you can let me know if it's not something you want to talk about, but sure. It's an interest to me because I can see some similarities. You said your dad didn't move to the States. I'm curious, did you ever still maintain a relationship with your father?
Yeah, early on there was so much going on in my life that obviously, his absence was felt, but I was dealing with learning a language and being in a new place, so I wasn't really thinking about him. We communicated, very rarely at that point, and also communication wasn't the same way where it was really simple to Skype or to text or to FaceTime or anything. So it took a little more effort and planning to make it happen. As I got older, I started kind of appreciating the fact that I miss my father. Now, my mother had remarried, and my stepfather is fantastic, and for all intents and purposes, is my father and raised me.
Right.
But I started kind of communicating with my father again in Iran. And he, at that point, couldn't come to the United States. I think he probably would have come to visit at least, never to move here. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't go back to Iran because I hadn't served in the military. And I was, at the age where, had I gone back, they would have taken me and put me in the army. So we made a plan, and we met each other in Turkey, in Istanbul. And I saw him, for the first time. Last time I'd seen him, I was 7. And then, I'm seeing him as an adult. So that was fantastic because he passed away shortly thereafter. But I had the opportunity to at least see him and connect with him.
Wow. Okay, man. All right. Take a shift gears here. I wanted to also talk with another. In my mind, he's an icon, not only in hip hop but just in the game. Period. Nas. I seen a number of pictures with you and him, and I saw that you did the cover for the Hip Hop Is Dead album.
Yes.
Talk to me a little about Nas. Like, how did you guys link up?
Well, Nasir is my wife's first cousin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
family.
He's family.
Right.
He's family. Fantastic guy. Obviously, you guys know his abilities as an MC, but he's just an all around sweet human being. So it's been a blessing to have him in our life. And actually, we have very little family here in LA, but he's one of the only ones. So we connect a lot. We get together a lot. He's been very supportive. It's interesting. The Hip Hop Is Dead cover. I remember my wife called me or something and said, "Hey, Nasir's looking for you. Give him a call." And at the time, I thought, oh, maybe I think there was a Prince thing going on sometime around then, and I thought maybe he was calling to see if I had tickets or whatever, some info on it. So when I called him back and he said, "Hey, I want you to shoot the cover of my new album," I was obviously very surprised and thankful. So ended up flying out to New York, and we discussed the idea, and I ended up shooting that.
Wow. Okay. All right. Man, and shout out to Nas, man. He's one of these guys that's really kept a high quality level in his work and what he stands for. I see him standing next to what's old girl's name? Nicki Minaj these days, but I ain't mad at that. Do you, sir?
I think they're friends.
Hey, I ain't mad. All right. I'm trying to jump in some of the questions here from Facebook. And let's see what we got here. Are there any shots of Prince that you wish you had gotten but were unable to get in front of a particular landmark or holding a particular instrument? Is there any shot like that?
No, I can't think of anything that. I guess it would have been nice to shoot him in Paris more. I was in Paris with him, but the schedule was so crazy the few times we went there that outside of the venues or the hotels, I didn't really have a chance to photograph him. But I always thought it would have been cool to shoot him atop the Eiffel Tower.
Ah, okay. It says, how did your time with Prince and in the world of Paisley shape, inform, or add to your perspective on life? What were some of the lessons you took from your time with Prince?
That's a great question. Well, working with Prince was such a huge part of my life. So 20 years worth of my life, I worked with him 10 years very, very closely and intimately. So one, it was just, it shaped kind of who I am. A lot of times I spent more time with him than I did with my family. So one, it was learning discipline. A lot of that I learned from him, watching him, his work ethic. Here's a guy that has everything, but for him to stay up late making music and get up early in the morning and continue to make music was just a amazing thing to see. And then I think the biggest lesson, really just watching the way he operated in the world, and this is one thing that I try to instill in my children, is not to see any limitations with possibilities. So for Prince, obviously, everything was possible. You know, you've heard the funny stories about him asking for a camel at 2 a.m. or whatever. Well, in his world, it was possible. And so I'm not saying I'm going to ask for a camel at 2 a.m., but I look at the world in a way that, okay, this is what I want to do, or this is what I want to accomplish. What are my steps versus what are the obstacles?
Wanted to talk about your book. Make sure we get that into Prince, A Private View. I got to ask you, I know you've answered this before, but Beyoncé doing the foreword. Did you have a relationship with her before that you could do this, or is this just like a dream, think big? And I would love
I didn't have a direct relationship with her. I'd met her several times. I met her, when she was rehearsing for the Grammys with Prince. Okay. I'd met her at some of the after shows when her and Jay-Z had come through, and he was playing at a little private club with a handful of people. So obviously I knew her. I don't know if she remembered me from those times, but reconnected through Yvette, who was Prince's publicist and works with Beyoncé very closely and is her publicist. So when the question of the forward came up, I actually thought of, before I even ran into Yvette, I thought of Beyoncé. Because for a few reasons. One, I wanted someone that was iconic, and I know a lot of people will say, well, she's not iconic in the same way Prince is, but she is today's icon and a very talented lady. Mm-hmm. I wanted someone that I knew Prince respected and whose music he liked. So that was another thing, and I know he's told me, himself what he thought of her and how much he respected her talent and her work ethic. And then the biggest reason really that I thought about Beyoncé was, who could I get whose voice would bring attention to Prince amongst the younger generation. I don't expect that young kids are going to go out to buy this book, but when they hear that Beyoncé is talking about Prince, hopefully they, it opens up their mind and say, okay, let me figure out who this dude is. Let me listen to his music. Let me look him up. So the idea was someone that would help continue his legacy and bring it to the attention of a new generation.
Wow. Okay. And what? Now it's called A Private View, but is that the distinctive theme to show a private side of Prince, or are there?
Somewhat. The book is really kind of, obviously it's about Prince, but also my experience working with him. Okay. And so I had a whole different, perspective on it. I was there after the musicians went to bed. I was there in the morning when he woke up at times. So I saw a lot of things. So it's really about my experience working with him, and that I guess is the private view. The book contains a lot of moments that people haven't seen that are similar to the one where he's walking down the street, But it also has a lot of the live shots from the concerts, portraits that we did that made it onto posters for jazz festival and whatnot. So it's a mix of a lot of things. And then I have some images from the 3121 parties, which nobody has also seen.
I think there's a picture. I don't know if this is from the book, but I think it's a picture with Stevie Wonder is in it.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, man.
I don't think that's. I don't remember. I don't know if that's in the book or not. But yeah, there's a lot of those parties were amazing. I don't think they'll ever be repeated. There'll ever be anything like that. But he would have the instruments just sitting there. Every party had all these instruments set up, and a lot of times Prince would play, but it was open to whoever could play and was daring enough to get on an instrument in front of Prince. Wow. But these people would come through. So Alicia Keys was there, John Mayer would show up, Justin Timberlake, a lot of different people would show up and get on the mic or get on the drums, or, Matthew McConaughey was seemed to always be there playing the bongos in the background. So, yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. Were any of those filmed that you remember?
The parties, I filmed a couple of them. I don't know if they made it into the 3121 film, but we did film a few of the parties.
Wow.
And a lot of times we would film those, like it was set up for the party, and we would start filming before the guests arrived. and we had some extras and some actors and whatnot, and we would film, and then the guests would arrive, and then the party would continue until 4 or 5 in the morning.
Another question from the Facebook, can you describe sort of what just an average, I don't know if you can use the word average, but what a day would be like working with Prince? Like sort of the events and how that would flow.
Well, for me, as a photographer, it would, when we were on the road, let's say, on a tour, wake up early. I would go over to Prince's hotel. If we hadn't looked at images the night before, we'd look at them there, make selects together, talk about how and where they're going to be used. And then he would get dressed and we'd go to the venue. They'd do a sound check. And he was very particular about the sound. So those sound checks would take a long time. He was at every one, a lot of big band leaders, leave it to their musical director to do the sound check. But Prince was in there, listening from all corners of the venue to make sure it sounded great everywhere. Wow. All the instruments and the vocals and everything was just right. So that would take a long time. Whereas for some people they do 1 or 2 songs and they move on. It was almost like they would do one set before he was happy with the sound, and then. There's a little bit of downtime. People would change, get into their show wardrobe. Prince would relax, and then the show would start. And then obviously he would do, an amazing 2-hour show, go back, change, and then we would head to some after party location or after show location, and then they would play for another 2 hours plus. And then after that, him and I would go and look at images. Wow. So the night wouldn't end usually till 5 or 6 in the morning. I mean, most of my recollection is driving home or going to the hotel with the sun coming up.
And this is all over the world. This
is all over the world. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
We'll wrap up a little bit here, but is there anybody who you would love to work with, whether they're alive or not? Like just.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like I worked with the pinnacle,
right,
with Prince, so I don't think anything would compare to that experience. And it's been difficult. It's hard for me to still fathom the fact that he's gone.
Mm-hmm. What do you say then? I saw you had a little interaction with a person on Facebook about the book. What do you say to those, how come you didn't do this book, before, or are you trying to cash in, that sort of thing? Can you address that sort of?
Yeah, you know what? First of all, I shouldn't have gotten into it with that person. I don't know why I was feeling the way I was feeling that day.
You're human, man. You're human.
It was nothing bad. She was just basically saying, "Why'd you make this book?" Quite honestly, after he passed, I couldn't look at any of the images that I had. It just brought back so many memories and just made it even more difficult. But there was an outpouring of kind of love from the fans and requests for the book. And so for me, it was therapy putting this book together. I say a little bit in the book about it, but I was looking for some form of closure because I just couldn't find it. Every day was difficult after he passed, and so it took me months before I could even start looking at images and consider doing a book. And then I got so many requests, so I said, okay, let me see what I can do. And so I started putting a proposal together, kind of loosely to hand to a lit agent to see if there was any interest. And right away, I had a few publishers that wanted to do it. So I did it for the fans. I did it for therapy for myself. People that think that making a niche book like this is a money-making endeavor are extremely wrong. It's probably cost me more money and time putting this book together than I'll see back, but I still think it's worthwhile. To continue his legacy and to hopefully put a smile on people's faces when they see, images and a perspective of Prince that maybe they haven't seen before.
All right. And we talked about the first time you worked with Prince. Can you talk about the last time you worked with Prince?
Yeah, he called me several times after the last time we worked together, and unfortunately the schedules didn't, there was conflicts and my schedule didn't allow me. But the last time was on the Welcome to Canada tour.
Okay.
And I went up and photographed him at several of the shows up there. And the very last picture, and it's in this book, is from an after show in Canada before we were heading to Seattle. I don't remember the name of the city, but and he didn't even. He's like, just enjoy the party. You don't need to take any pictures. It was a really darkly lit club. Not a lot of people. There was a curfew, but the mayor of this little town was there, and so he turned the police away. And like, are you kidding? It's Prince.
Wow.
So he let him play past the city curfew. And I pulled my phone out. I was behind the stage, up on kind of a catwalk, and I pulled my phone out and I snapped a few pictures from up there. And that was the last photograph I took of Prince. Now I saw him, many times after that. We'd hang out, or if he was in town, I'd go see a show or go over to the house or go to the party. But that is the last photograph.
Wow. Okay. Did you end up coming to the Seattle thing, or?
No, from there I had to head back because again, what would happen with Prince is a lot of this stuff was very kind of last minute. It was he was inspired by something. So many of my trips, like when I went to Panama or when I went to Morocco, I literally had less than a 24-hour notice from him. So I already had a job back in California, so I couldn't stay for the Seattle show. I had to go after we were done with Canada.
Oh, okay. Because I live in Seattle, so I remember that show, and that was my first time going to an after show. He played here at a club in town. It was amazing.
Yeah, I did a short stint in Seattle. After college, I moved to Seattle trying to break into the film business.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, real quick, you mentioned film, so is there aspirations to possibly do a major motion picture, directing, or anything like that?
Well, there is. I mean, that's kind of the reason I got into this business, was to try to tell stories, and I realized I'm good at the visual side of it, and I became a cinematographer. And so that's most of the work that I do now is in cinematography on commercials and occasionally music videos. But I actually, speaking of projects, I'm about to start a documentary, co-directing it with my partner Glenn Kino, about Tommy Smith, who was the 1968 Olympic gold medalist at the Summer Games in Mexico, who did the iconic Black Power salute.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's on board. We're about to do that documentary. John Legend and his team just signed on to be producers. So
nice.
We're in the midst of making that happen.
Okay. We'll keep our eyes out on that for sure.
Yes, please. Thank you.
That'll be a big deal. And I'm a movie guy as a viewer, so I have to ask you, what are your, I'll give you three choices. You can pick three. But what are your three top movies for whatever reasons or whatever?
Man, that's a hard one. One that just came to my mind right away because I saw it recently, and then someone sent me the book, was The Shawshank Redemption.
Okay.
I love that film. And then there's a lot of obscure kind of foreign films that I got into, but one that I really loved. It's a Wim Wenders film called Wings of Desire. Which I think they made a remake of here in the States called City of Angels or something, but it doesn't compare to the original. Gosh, there's so many. So,
what's your guilty pleasure film?
Blue Velvet.
Really? Okay.
I had a dark side. So coming up in the film business, what's his what's his name that directed Blue Velvet?
Lynch?
Yeah, David Lynch.
Yeah.
My short-term memory is going. Lynch was one of my favorites. So I remade a scene from Eraserhead as one of my projects, in school. I can't name the third one.
It's too much, huh?
That's too much.
I hear that, man. All right. Well, we're going to wrap this up. Again, I'm going to get it right here. Afshin Shahidi.
Perfect.
There you go. I'll keep practicing. But I definitely will go out and get the book. I already know all of the Prince fans, we're going to snatch that thing up. So
I appreciate that. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Are you going to, any plans to do like a book tour or signings or anything?
I don't know if there's a big book tour planned. I know that I will do a signing here in LA, possibly one in Minneapolis.
Okay.
What I am planning is to do a gallery exhibit, hopefully in LA, in New York, in Miami, and then after that, we'll see, if people are interested, maybe I can take it to a few other places.
Definitely. All right. Well, we will be there if you are. If look out for him on Facebook, I imagine, are places where you can find out about signing in LA. And where can they find you online, sir?
Online, Afshin Shahidi is my Instagram handle, and then Afshin Shahidi on Facebook.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, please go on to his page or go on to the comment section of this and thank him for coming on the show and spending time with us. Let him know we really appreciate it. And we really appreciate the work you have done with Prince over the years. There's a lot of iconic pictures that you've done that I was like, oh, he did that one. Always the one I love is it's the one with Prince. He's got the hat. It's the black background. I think it was musicology picture.
I think it was from the Black Sweat. That's
Black Sweat, yes.
Yeah, I think that was one of his favorite shots of himself that I took.
That's a classic one, man. I love that shot, man. You really captured him in that one. So
I was blessed to have the opportunity to work with him.
Yes, sir. And again, man, we salute you and your family for really just doing it on a high level with grace, man. And you did a great job. You and your wife done a great job with your kids. Of course, we all rooting for your daughter, man, and everything that she's got going on. I was talking to somebody, and it was like, man, she kind of the good parts of that Lisa Bonet vibe, you know, and so we kind of getting that that different world type of vibe, man. And so she's in, she's in a great position, and this show Blackish and everything represents is a really good look. So salute to your family, man. Blessings on that. Ladies and gentlemen, you already know what it is. The Prince Podcast here on Podcast Juice. We have to thank our Patreon supporters. Thank you so much for supporting the show. If you have any questions, you want to find us, it's always podcastjuice.net. Hey, my name is Michael Dean. Work it like a job. We'll see you next time. Peace. So young, still a victim of the 12 gauge. The memories of the course, my father's thoughts, and I ain't going back to court. So what you thought? I'm trying to hear the scene, living from my enemies. When I lived at age 23, so much better. And we got bones. Come on. And it's not funny. Maybe we should leave it alone. Yeah, that's right. Cause they got money. Yeah. We got bones. Yo, this is for Kane, yo. Check it out. We sample beats, your suit, try to fight us. Man, you still be home with all the writers and we back alive, old beast, but we appreciate it. You wanna survive, you'll be another memory to us. Ashes to ashes and dust to dust. So understand the way that I live, cause that's positive. And it's a message that I gotta give. This is a benefit for you and me. I'm talking about a DEACE. The choice of one is turning new leaf. I got gold teeth and they don't chew beef. No pork from my folks, drink the fish on my dish. You can't fall a victim, but something can you wish. I hold it like water, starter. I put you out of order. I fraud you. Rappers are bragging and tagging and bragging to be on the bandwagon, but I'm the last dragon. We're done back to retract the back, so just get back. I'm young, gifted, and blind. We got bones. Maybe we should leave it alone. Cause they got money. And we got phones. Yeah. And it's not funny. Maybe we should leave it alone. Yo, kid. Fresh out of school, I was a high school grad. Got to get a job cause I was a high school dad. I wish I got paid for rapper to the nation, but that's not likely. So here's my application. Pass it to the man at AT&T. Cause when I was in school, I got the AEE. But there's no fancy for this youngster. I didn't have no money, so now I have to punch up. I got a slave and be happy. Do what white man says. There's no room for the African. I always knew. Now when
o'clock G's. But welcome to McDonald's, can I take your order please? I got a secret cure that might give you cancer, cause my son doesn't take them for an answer. Now I pay the taxes, and I never give it back. What about diapers and bottles and Similac? Do I have to sell me a whole lot of crack for decent shelter, clothes on my back? Or should I just wait from help from Obama? They can't fix the hood, but they got Osama. They got the money, we got the phones, and it's not funny. Maybe we should leave it alone, cause they got the money, we got the phones, and it's not funny. Maybe we should leave it alone.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Maybe you don't know what I'm saying, but I'm gonna explain it real quick. See, listen. They got the money, so we got the phones, we got the cell phones, all the gadgets, and you know, we got the spinners and all that old stuff. But we don't have all the money, we don't have all the power. We too focused on the small stuff, you know what I'm saying? So I'm thinking maybe we should leave it alone and let's get refocused. So that's what this song's about. But anyway, y'all don't want to hear that. Get back to the song, right? Cause it feels good. So I gotta give you that. Give you something to pump in your car. Before we get out of here, couple shout outs. Check it out. This is freedomtrainonline.com. My name is Michael Dean. You know how we get down. Check it out. More love. More love. Yeah. Also, we gotta give a shout out to my man in Minneapolis. You already know. Let's give it one time, say the MPG, more love. The MPG, more love. Please don't spill me. But then, oh yes, of course, dedication and celebration. Shout out to Tupac Shakur. Yeah. More love. And of course, my man, Big Daddy Kane, the God. Yeah. More love. More love. And also we had to give another one out to my man O'Shea, Mr. Ice Cube. We salute you, sir. Pioneer. More love. More love. Yeah. Alright, we out of here, y'all.